The battle cries of the Phrygians echoed in Abaya's ears. The raiders all wore the shape of men, but the priests still found their appearance inhuman. Many wore gaudy ornaments that pierced their flesh with barbs. They were lean as ghouls, but their muscles strained and flexed like cords of steel. Many of them bore wicked scars across their bodies. Abaya was unsure if they were marks of honor or punishment, or if there was a difference between the concepts among the wild, shrieking Phrygians. No, Abaya could not think of them as Phrygians. They had become less than men, and should not be spoken of in the same breath as the kingdom that stood before the darkness. These things were merely heretics. The horsemen of the Temerine were on deck with their light shields and swords, ready for any boarding action. They were brave men and masterful horsemen, and they could hold their own in dismounted combat. But they would most assuredly be at a disadvantage fighting against the sure-footed heretic soldiers. Abaya hoped the musket and pikemen would be able to fend off the attackers. There was another hail of arrows that arched from the pursuing ships. They were closer now, and a dozen arrows managed to clatter against the deck. A few of the Temerine caught the shafts against their shields. The muskets held their fire. They would be too inaccurate at this distance. One of the Temerine laughed and pulled the arrow free from his shield. He looked as if he was about to say something. When he looked down at the hand that touched the arrow, it was smeared with a black tar-like substance. Within moments the color drained from the man's face, and his eyes rapidly became bloodshot. He began to shake. It was only a tremble at first, but within moments he had fallen to the deck of the ship, convulsing. Flecks of foam began to spray from his mouth, and then he laid still.
Poison! The cowards used poison!
Captain Fanuel strode to the rear of the ship, placing his helmet on.
Fire upon those dogs! And do not let those arrows touch bare skin!
The Space Marine picked up one of the arrows with his gauntleted hands, and sure enough, the black tar-like substance completely coated the entire arrow except for the fletching. Fanuel tossed it overboard. Abaya could see dead fish rising to the surface where the wicked arrows had struck in the water.
Man the main guns! Load with chain shot! Musketmen, on my mark! Fire!
Smoke and fire erupted from the muskets, sending hot lead singing towards the enemy ship. The weapons were not terribly accurate, but in a volley that huge, a few of the heretics fell to the deck with huge wounds opening in their chests. They replied with another volley of arrows rained among the troops. The Temerine held up their shields to protect the crew, but some of the cursed arrows struck true, and the strength of the men quickly was stolen away by the withering poison, as they fell to the deck in convulsions.
Do not touch the arrows! Do not even touch the dead unless your hands are covered! The cannons are ready, sir! Starboard aft! Fire!
The muzzle exploded and sent 2 cannonballs linked by chain spinning towards the enemy ship with the intent to snap their masts and cripple their ships. The first shot missed as the chain spun off the port side of the enemy ship, tearing through a handful of men in the process, but missing the masts. Captain Fanuel swore beneath his breath.
Out of my way!
The Space Marine pushed his way towards the other deck gun and lifted the loaded cannon off its pivot. The nearby gunners gasped as the powerful captain lifted the several 100-kilo deck gun as if it was nothing. He rested it on his hip and took careful aim.
Whatever you do, do not stand behind me! Clear a path!
Granting only a moment for the men to get out of the way, Captain Fanuel touched fuse to powder, and the blast of the cannon sent the Space Marines skidding backwards a good 2 meters, causing splinters to spray up from the deck. A huge plume of smoke obscured the shot. Then there was the sound of snapping timbers as the crimson sails of the mainmast fell tumbling into the sea. A cheer began to rise up from the men, when suddenly the mizzen snapped as well. The Ashkenazi and the Temerine erupted into cheers and praises to the Emperor. Captain Fanuel had fired the chain shot and managed to slice through both masts. The corsair vessel listed off to starboard and began to drift aimlessly as the Ashkenazi vessel began to put distance between itself and the damaged vessel. Abaya could feel his heart rising. Then he looked down the line of ships as the other scarlet-sailed vessels were closing in on their allies. Smoke began to rise from the other ships as volley after volley was fired from the musketmen. Captain Fanuel resumed barking orders.
Hard to port! We need to keep these vermin off our backs! I will have our men reach land if I have to tear this enemy fleet apart with my bare hands. Prepare to board! Slay the heretics! Show no mercy! For the Emperor!
With that, the helmsman turned the ship hard to port until she was nearly perpendicular with the enemy vessels. The skirmish at sea had ended, and now the true battle had begun, and the Emperor's angel of death had been truly released. And Abaya felt no pity in his heart for those who dared to stand against him. No man do they call me. My mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Thank you all for listening to the latest episode of the Heart of Iron series. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a like and a comment so that you too might be able to annihilate sadistic degenerates with your enormous Space Marine pal. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so you can hear more stories about 18th century naval battles taking place 38,000 years in the future. If you would like to support me, you can do so via Patreon or PayPal. Both of those will be linked in the description. And if you have absolutely no idea what's going on, you can click on the Heart of Iron playlist and listen to the story from the beginning. That link should be appearing on screen right now. Thank you all once again for listening. No Man out.